Hello, Sacramento. My name is Luis Sumter, and I've been a realtor in Sacramento for over 20 years. And I'm here to challenge some common myths about historic preservation. Myth number 1, historic properties cannot be updated or changed. Residential historic properties like these have no restrictions on interior changes. So popular renovations like kitchen and bath remodels are as easy as obtaining a building permit. And additions are common and typically found on the back of the historic building. Myth number 2, historic designation typically results in lower property values. This is simply not borne out of the evidence. In fact, economists agree that historic properties typically have a higher property value than buildings without a historic designation, hands down. Myth number 3, historic properties cannot be insured. There are literally thousands of historic properties across Sacramento, and with the exception of a few, they all are insured. Sure, some insurance companies make it more difficult to insure historic properties, but most understand that historic properties really are no different than other older buildings, and they can be insured at reasonable rates. Myth number 4, historic districts create stagnation and do not allow a city to grow. Look at this vibrant corridor that we're standing in. These historic commercial buildings have been repurposed from their original industrial or retail uses and now are home to some of the most vibrant and popular restaurants in the city. And just look across the street. This residential duplex fits in nicely with its historic neighboring residences and businesses, yet it's brand new. Bottom line, historic preservation does not negatively affect property values. It even tends to result in higher and more stable values over time. More importantly, historic preservation makes a city vibrant, and it creates an identity and a culture that we should all be proud of. Which is why much of my business has been working with clients who buy and sell historic properties. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think this block of historic buildings right here is a great case in point. This block is called Bungalow Row, and the city had the foresight and did the work and study to set aside these buildings, all built about 100 years ago, to create a unique historic district. Hi, I'm Matt Piner. I'm an architect who's lived and worked here in the city of Sacramento since roughly 1989 when I bought an old house. So one of the things that's really great about the old buildings is that these things that are built into them are passive and permanent, meaning that they work without any moving parts or energy expenditure, and they're there for the life of the home. So they've been there for 100 years, they'll be there for another 100 years. The people that buy them are proud of them, and the people that walk and bike these streets, then come to visit, appreciate the fact that we have this window back in time. So one of the misconceptions about old buildings is that they're energy hogs, that somehow it costs more money, you're going to have higher bills, but actually that couldn't be further from the truth. So one of the sayings that a well-known architect said is that the greenest building is the one that's already built. And because the energy and effort that went into building them has already been done, we call that embodied energy. We don't have to expend that energy again. Some people think that these buildings are just old and we should tear them down. But what happens is we lose that embodied energy. If we lose them forever. We don't get that back. Another thing that these buildings have taught us is they were built in an era where Sacramento, our river city, actually would experience regular flooding. And because of that, these buildings were built at a certain distance above the ground, having flood basements and other features. Today, those sheltered, earth-coupled areas under the house stay cool, and they're a great place to run ductwork and provide a very stable temperature for these homes. Because they were built at a time that our great-grandparents' generation, they didn't have air conditioning. So they had figured out how to shade the buildings with eaves. They learned that our temperate climate makes it pleasant to be out front, so they have these broad front porches. They have good cross ventilation features, high ceilings. They were really designed for an era without air conditioning. So they are, by their nature, very energy efficient already. So these are just a few of the features and what these buildings have to teach us, and why we can thank the preservation program here in the city that identifies and helps preserve and protect these buildings. One final thought about these beautiful homes in this downtown area is that these lots generally are very deep. They go all the way to a service alley in the back. And because of that, there are actually these spaces within these neighborhoods by design which allow the potential for infill housing. So it's really an important thing that these neighborhoods give us, that we can thank those who came before us for providing for us. Wouldn't you agree, Bae?
Absolutely. Hi everyone, my name is Bae Miri and I'm with Miri Development. I'm standing here along the historic R Street corridor. This historic corridor is really special to me. There's been a lot of hard work put in by a lot of people in our community to make this corridor come alive. Nowhere else in the city do you have completed streets, big patios, and such an abundance of really cool local restaurants, cafes, bars, and housing up above than you do along the historic R Street corridor and the K Street downtown corridor. Behind me is the historic B&G building at 11th and R Street. I was lucky enough to be involved in this mixed-use building that has a really cool vegan fast food restaurant on the ground floor and a creative office engineering firm on the upper floors. I was also lucky enough to be involved in other historic rehab projects at 14th and R and in downtown on K Street. Without historic preservation, our cities lose their character and their culture. And historic preservation is absolutely important to the housing crisis, which is such an important priority right now. Historic preservation allows us to bring all different types of really cool housing to our central cities. Without it, everything would be very vanilla and plain. Without the Mills Act and federal tax credits, these historic preservation projects would not be possible. They are very valuable tools, and historic preservation is critical to the housing crisis. Am I right, Mike?
You bet, Bae. Hi, I'm Mike Malinowski. I'm a Sacramento architect with experience on dozens of historic adaptive reuse projects over the years. We're here at a building on R Street that was formerly the Lawrence Warehouse. It was built 100 years ago, one of the first in Sacramento out of reinforced concrete, to store just about anything, entire households, including their Model T car. Today, it has 116 affordable artist housing units that range from studio live-work units to full 3-bedroom family housing. This building's financing was helped by federal tax credits, and in fact, it used two kinds of tax credits, both the housing tax credits and the historic tax credits. Right next door is another historic building, a 3-story brick building, even older than the Lawrence. Today, it's office over ground level restaurant, and it was able to use Mills property tax abatement. When I look at these projects, I think win-win, no matter how you look at it. Josh, what do you think?
You know, absolutely. You know, we're concerned with both financially successful projects as well as the company's legacies. These types of projects are great for both. I'm Josh with Downtown Railyard Venture, or DRV. We believe that preservation matters for business, for tourism, for culture, and for identity. Within the central shops, within these amazing buildings, we see this as an opportunity, not a constraint. The central shops at one point was the largest industrial facility on the West Coast. Each building here had a specific purpose. Over to the west, you see the boiler shop. Over to the east, you see the paint shop. As such, each of those buildings contributed in its unique way to establishing railroad-related equipment and services. Perhaps this is the most special spot in the central shops. This interior plaza, courtyard, you see the different eras. This place we're standing here, I think it's truly one of the most special places within the central shops. You can just imagine the energy, the focus. Each building represents a different era. Each building integral to the success of the western terminus of the Transcontinental Railroad. This place is awesome. You know, thousands and thousands of people have worked at the Railyards. It was Sacramento's largest employer for many, many years. Those folks who worked at the Railyards, you can just feel their hard work, their efforts, their sweat within each of these buildings. Railroad equipment and railroad-related services were all formed here and established here and ultimately led to the formation of the Transcontinental Railroad. You know, Central Shops, it's adjacent to downtown Sacramento. It's adjacent to the Sacramento Valley Station, one of the largest intermodal facilities in the country. And as such, this historical location, once part of the Central Pacific Railroads, is now set up to be part of the extension and growth of Sacramento moving forward. These buildings, they benefit from state and federal historic tax credits, which help offset the cost of rehabilitation and repurposing these amazing structures. They're complicated, they're challenging, they're beautiful, but it costs a lot of money. Those historic tax credits really enable projects like this to establish that cultural identity and center for the Railyards. When people are here, they feel these buildings, they're authentic. You know, people have been working here for so long. You can just see it in the buildings. They had purpose. They feel the effort that went into each one of these buildings. They're unique. As such, it's perfect for establishing the identity and cultural center for the Railyards moving forward. So the Railyards doubles the footprint of downtown Sacramento. We're going to bring in thousands of new residents. We're going to bring in new business. We're going to bring in new entertainment facilities. We're going to bring in a new medical campus. Central to that is the Central Shops, the historic district. It's the authentic cultural identity for the Railyards. Personally, for me, to be part of a project, to work on these amazing buildings that has the scope and the reach and affects the legacy of Sacramento is amazing. Any final words, Luis?
You've just heard from real estate and development professionals who understand the incredible value of working with historic properties. There's a bias in our industry that we would like to dispel about working with historic properties as both expensive and unpredictable, which typically is not the case. So we hope you will reach out to one of us or city staff the next time you're dealing with a historic property, so you can learn more about how historic preservation can help our community thrive.